Okay, hello and welcome to the second part of our thumbstick shooter demo. I think that we're going to finish up everything and make sure that we have everything playable. So I double clicked on Unity and opened up the project file, and I'm going to click thumbstick shooter demo, which is what I had titled it. The things we're going to implement today are going to be moving enemies. We're going to spawn enemies that move. We're going to give our bullets collision and make sure that we can destroy our enemies, which will do two things. It will get rid of them from the game and also add points to a score that we'll have. And we will have two things for the game, which is how many points did you get, and a timer for how much time you have to get those points. After we have all that and we have a you win or how much points you got, we will add in the controller script at the end so that you can play with either the mouse and keyboard or with a controller. Okay, and if you remember when we hit play, the last things we had in the first part was a moving character, and you could shoot bullets that would eventually disappear. And to get moving enemies, we're going to first go to Game Object, 3D Object, Cube. We're going to make a 1x2x1 so that it's the same size as our player. And we'll give it a material. So we'll go to Materials, right-click, Create, Material, and I'll call this Enemy. Drag it into Materials, give it a new color. Okay, and then we're going to give our cube a name, enemy, that works. And this cube is going to be similar to our bullets, where we have one bullet that we can just create time and time again. We're going to do that with our enemies. We're going to say, after a random amount of time has passed, create another enemy, and then we're going to have our enemies move towards the player. Okay. First, we want to get this one moving just the way we'd like, which the things I'd like it to do are move towards the player, look towards the player, and move towards the player. And then if it collides with the player, maybe we'll have like a health system and you lose a point or you lose time. I think that would be better. We'll just have, if you get hit by a zombie, you have less time to do your score. But the first thing is adding a new script. We'll right click to scripts, create C# script, and I'll title this Enemy Controls. Okay, double click on it to open up in Visual Studios or Mono Develop, whichever one you have. Okay, our scripts are open. I'm going to drag Visual Studios over to the left side. And here we have essentially two things that we need to keep track of. One would be the player. We need to find the player. And then two, we need to figure out how fast we're going to look at them and move towards them. The first thing is we want to create an open variable for our player. So we will say, actually, we may keep it private and we'll just find it in game. Private game object player. And I will make this a lowercase p. And then the other thing we want to keep track of is the speed. For now, we'll make it public so we can adjust it in-game. Public flow speed. And we will make these both private. And the last thing is to add notes. Okay, and on start right now, we'll set speed to be 0.5. And to find the player, we're going to use GameObject find. So that when an enemy spawns, it will look for the player, and then it's going to find whatever character, whichever game object has the name that we've written here, which is player, and it will add that into this spot. And the next thing we're going to do is tell our enemy to look at our player. And we do that with a transform.lookat. And here we'll type player.transform. There we go, lowercase t. Okay, and so this is what we have so far. We've got the game object for the player. We found it, we gave ourselves a speed. Right now we're going to be looking at it, and the last thing we have to do is move towards it. And we do that the same way we did on our player and the same way we did on our bullet. We're going to transform.translate forward. Okay, go to our enemy. And add our enemy controls. And let's test it out. Yep, that works. And I'd like to try changing what we changed the speed by. So I'm going to try delta time. And that slows it down a lot. Which is actually good because it gives us, I think, more control over other players' speed. So I'm actually going to do that on our player movement. I'm also going to change our translations to times time.delta time times speed. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to find the other places where we have our speed. Okay. And an important thing is this means that we will have to reset what our speed is so that it's at a good number. And also under the bullet controls. Okay, so now we move almost nothing at all. We'll go to player, movements, and we have speed at 0. Oh, right. Well, so we have to increase, for player, we have to increase our max speed. And I'll try setting this to 10 first and see how that goes. For the bullets, I'm going to set the speed to 20. And I'm going to decrease the timer by 3 to be 3.5. Okay, and for the enemy controls, I'd like that speed to be 5.5. Okay. And we're building up speed, which is good. I think it's still a little slower than I'd like, maybe just a little faster. But I feel like this is a good speed roughly for the enemy. Maybe if we go a little faster, maybe they can go a little faster. The bullets seem like they're at a good speed too. And if we go slow, then we have to work it up. Cool. So under player, movements, I'm going to change speed from 10.5 to 12.0. And the enemy controls, I'm going to change that from 5.5 to 5.85. Okay. So we have moving enemies. The next thing we want to do is make it a prefab and spawn them. We go to our enemy. We'll drag it into prefabs. And there we have the copy of it. We can get rid of this one. And we're going to create a new game object. Create empty. And we have just a transform. We'll move it off to the side. And we will actually create a new script. And I'll call it spawn enemies. I'd like to be consistent with the rest, so I'm going to call it spawn underscore enemies. Double click to open, reload. And this one we can actually just take our bullet shooting controls and copy that, go into our enemy, or I mean spawn controls, and paste over it. And since we're spawning from one object, we can just get rid of our shoot from, because our prefab is just going to be the enemy. We don't need a shoot timer, but we do need a spawn timer. And then we need a wait time for each. So what we'll do is we'll have a timer that keeps track of when our enemy has spawned. And then we'll have another timer that gives a new random number to say, hey, in, you know, I don't know, anywhere from 1 second to 10 seconds, spawn another enemy. And we will change these. Okay, and here we can change this from shoot timer to spawn timer equals time.time. And we don't want to set, we do want to set shoot time, but we're going to set it to be random. And we'll say that wait time equals random.range. And then we'll give it two numbers to give it a random range. So we'll say anywhere between, for the first one, for the very first beginning, we'll set it between 0 and 4. And then here is where we'll set the condition. We'll say if time.time is greater than spawn timer, plus whatever our random wait time is, then we're going to create a clone of it. And these ones we will call clone enemy. And we'll say to instantiate enemy. And here we can get rid of shoot from, because we're going to instantiate it right where the object we've placed the script on is. Okay. And now we forgot something. Okay. Spawn timer, wait time, and then we have to set these again each time we spawn a clone. So here we'll go to the bottom and we'll paste these and we'll say that reset the spawn timer, that's fine, and then we'll give it a new random time. And I personally don't want to spawn a lot of enemies, at least not early on. So I will set this to 4, and then I will set this to 10. So every 4 to 10 seconds, a new enemy will come. And if that's too little, we can always change it. I'd like to change this name to enemy spawn. And apply the script to it, and add the enemy into the enemy spot, and then hit play and check it out. There we go, there's our first enemy. He's coming towards us, we're running away. So it looks like it's pretty easy to get away from them once we've built up speed, but starting from 0 makes it a little tough. So I'd like to change the build-up speed to be faster so that when we stop, we don't have to start up so slow again. But I would like there to be a little bit of moving slow. So right now I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to go into the player movement. And here is where we're increasing speed, so I'm going to times that by 2. And the same for the other ones. When it's speed plus equals speed, I'm going to copy this, times 2, times 2, and times 2. So for each direction, it should build up a little bit faster. And let's test it out. Still a little too slow. I'd like to try changing this to maybe something like 6. And actually, I can already see that I'm not going to want to do this every time. So I'm going to create a new private variable. And I'm going to call it acceleration. But the variable I'm just going to call a float excel. And I'm going to set that to 6.0 f. And I'm going to put it in the start. And then I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to replace it here on all the 6s. And this too. Okay, so now we should only have to change it once in the future if we're like, hey, that's not the right acceleration. I think that feels much better. It's a slow start, but nice. Okay, cool. We've got our enemies. We can actually just make as many of these as we want, but right now I'm just going to continue on. The next thing is I'm going to add the user interface, the timer, how long we have, and that is created by going to game object, UI, and we're going to, normally if we need a new canvas which holds all of this, we'd hit canvas, but I'm just going to hit text, and then since we don't have one, it'll create it for us. There we go. And I'm going to call this timer text. Hit F on canvas to get the full screen, to get it in full screen. Then I'm going to drag this up here and change, to make it less blurry, I'm going to change these both to overflow first, so that way it can go outside of the square. And I'm going to increase the text to be very big. And then I'm going to hit R and drag it so that it shrinks, scale it down. And that will be where the timer text is. And I'd like it to be in the center, so I centered it. I'd like it to be at the top. And with our canvas, when I hit maximize on full play, it's gonna scale a little weird. Oh, I suppose it didn't. Awesome. Well, just in case, I'm going to change constant pixel size to scale with screen, and let's see if that still works. And it makes it bigger, which I think is nicer because you have more control over it. But I will shrink it down a little. Okay. Perfect. Now we can set up a script to take care of it. And I'm actually going to do this in an empty game object that I'm going to call Game Manager. And I'm going to set the transform to 0, or I'm going to just reset it. Click Reset. And on this Game Manager, I'm going to add a new script. So right click under scripts, create C# Game Manager. And again, I didn't do an underscore. I'm going to go to Game Manager and apply the Game Manager script, and then I'm going to double click to open it up. Now here we're going to access the user interface, which we need to call another Unity engine variable, which is using Unity engine.ui. And with this, we can then access things like the user interface, text, all that jazz. We will have a public text variable, and I will call this timer text. And then we are going to comment it. And then we will create a float for how much time we have left. Okay, so on the start, we can say time left equals, if we have 10 seconds, we'll put 10, but I'm going to put 40 seconds. Okay. And then we will add, we will say what it is in the timer text. So we will say timer text.text. That's saying whatever our number is, or whatever the text says, we are now going to make it say something else. Equals and here I'm going to do a break, which is quotations \n, and quotations plus, and we will say this is where we have the timer. And the reason I wrote that is because we want it to be just 2 numbers. We want to round the decimal over 2 places, but that is not exactly how you type it, so I'm going to find that right now. It is toString and then you do in quotations F2. And this should give us just the two numbers. So instead of saying 40.333 or something, it'll say just 40. And now we also have to set up our countdown. So before we decrease our timer, we want to set up a condition that says if our timer is greater than 0, because if it's less than 0, it'll say negative a number, and we just want it to end at 0. So we'll say if time left is greater than 0, we'll decrease the timer. So if we have time left, decrease the timer, else we'll set it to 0. Okay, so every time we start the game, we have 40 seconds to complete the challenge. And it will display our timer as time remaining, and then under it will say the time, but just two numbers. And then we have another condition that says if time is greater than 0, we will decrease the time. So we will say time left equals time.time you know what? Maybe, let's see. Time left will be 40, and we will create time to complete. So we'll have a new private float. We'll call it time to complete, and this will actually be 40, because this is how much time we will give our player, and this number will be the difference between the two. So that changes to time to complete, and we'll say time left equals time.time minus time complete. And time.time starts at 0 at the beginning, but then actually continues forward. So maybe let's see. What if we put time left? We'll just put minus minus. And in that case, actually, we can revert things to the way they were. So I'm going to hit Control-Z until we have here. And I'm going to change this from time left minus minus. There we go. Okay, let's see if that works. We're going to go to our text. Yes. Okay, so timer text, we're going to drag that into timer text. We're going to hit play, and we're going to test it out. Yes, perfect. And we actually, when it played, it showed 0 after that. So what we're going to do is try changing that to 0 because we just want to see the number. Yes. So instead of 40 seconds, we'll do 100. Let's do 320. 320 seconds. And we also want to show it as, you know, a timer, so we could have 0, 0, 0, 0, something like that, because we're going to have minutes now. Okay. And according to this, we will do a conversion. So we'll say string minutes equals math dot floor parentheses, and this is where we put our timer, so we'll say time left divided by 60 dot to string 0, 0. And we're going to do something very similar for seconds. We'll do string seconds equals math dot floor time left, and then we're going to do the percent 60 Okay. And now let's see what we get. We'll hit play. Cool, it didn't work yet. Okay. Let's try this. Okay, so it's very similar to what we had. They're integers now instead of strings. And we will change this to time left, time left. Ooh, perhaps is this why? Let me undo and try this to F2 and see if that was the reason. Perhaps it was, perhaps it wasn't. Yeah, that was the reason. No, that wasn't the reason. So let's just set it to something like 65, because it should be a minute. It should be a minute timer. And right now we're just getting it to show seconds. Okay, so it looks like there is a shorter version. So someone wrote total time, seconds, which is, we'll replace this with time left, divided by 60 to string, and then we'll do time left, percent 60 to string. And we'll say time left equals. That does not work. Okay. We will try the method earlier, which was having ints instead of strings, and we will change it again to time left. And they have a new thing, nice time, so we will say display nice time. Which means we can get rid of this. And let's see if that works, and then we can comment it. Yeah, that's what we want. Cool. Okay, so we have an integer for minutes, the conversion float, or the conversion int for seconds, and then we string display as timer. Cool. And now we can set our thing to 320. And the next thing to set up would be bullet collisions. I feel like we still shoot too much, so I'm going to set the shoot timer to be a little less. I'm going to set this to 1.75. And I think it's better, but I'd still like it to be even less. Oh, you know what's funny is that we've never set up if input. So here, when we press our mouse, we have to set a limit for the shoot time. So if we've pressed the mouse and it's been 0.75 seconds plus shoot time, and now we should see that it decreases. And now we shoot one bullet every few seconds. Okay, that's not what we want though. We want to do it fast, just not as fast as we had it. So we'll change that to 1.5. And we'll hit play. Still pretty slow. Okay, we will change this to 0, 1. And this is the other problem. Let's see how fast that is. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see if this works better. Okay, cool. That is a lot, and that's more like before. So now we will change this to and that's a little too slow. So I'm going to change it to 0.2, 0.2, and now we're going to go to collisions. On our bullet controls, we're going to create a check, a collision check. So we will say private void on collision enter. It needs to check for collisions, and we will shorten that with col. This will be for anything the bullet collides with. And the first thing we will check is if it collides with an object whose tag equals enemy. We will say if col, because that's what we call the collision, dot game object dot tag equals enemy. Okay. And the way we destroy our enemy is to destroy parenthesis. We will say col dot game object. And then after, you can give it a time to destroy if it's like if it's poison or something and they don't die right away or anything like that. If you want to give it time, you can put a number and they'll die that long, but I will put 0 so that they die as soon as they touch the bullet. Okay. And now we have enemies coming, and there's nothing happening because either our bullet or our enemy needs a collider. I mean a rigid body. So I'll do it on the enemy. Physics, rigid body, and I'm going to turn off gravity and use kinematic and see if that works. Well, the other reason it won't work is because our enemy needs a tag, so we haven't tagged it yet. We will go to here, untagged, add tag. We did capital ENEMY, save. Then we click on our enemy, we change its tag to enemy, and we apply that, and now let's see. Still does not work. Okay. Let's try with gravity. Yep, then it works. Okay, I have to make that application to the rest. Apply. They all have gravity now. This does mean that they will fall if I don't have a surface under them, just like that. So I will expand this. Our enemy spawn is right there. And I'm going to create a few enemy spawns. So I'm going to create another game object called enemy spawns with an S. And I'm going to put the enemy spawn under here and put 0 after so we can duplicate it. And I'll put one on each side. Okay. And part of the reason why I wanted to reduce the bullets is because if we had too many bullets, you could just spin around and definitely kill everything, but now it's not as likely. Okay, we've got the timer, we've got the enemies. I'd like to set up a little bit of visual interest so that our player has sort of keys and can tell what's going on around him. We may end up moving the camera out, but let's see first. Under ground, I'm going to create an empty game object, call it environment. And here I'm going to put 3D and other objects in to create little obstacles. I'm going to call this wall. I'm going to put a few of them and rotate them. I'd like to make one, use it as a small ramp. And then I'd like to do some fencing so that there's a visual indication that the player can't go past. And I will do that by clicking on the ground, F, game object 3D, Q. And this will be the fence. It will be 0.5 there. It's going to be this height, but then we'll hit Control D to make a copy of it, drag it up, scale it down, scale it in, and then hit Control D to make another copy, and that's going to be what our fence will look like. Before I duplicate a bunch, I do want to just create a fence material. I'll hit Create, Material, Fence. I'd like this to be a sort of gray, or I suppose brown would be nice, but if our ground is brown, we don't want it to all blend together. So fence goes there, there, and there. Drag it over to the corner. Okay, and here I'm going to create a new empty game object to keep all the fences in. They're sort of just like folders. And I put fence. And I'm going to create a new folder or empty object, and I'll call this wall 1. Okay. And perfect, we can just get rid of the last, that one. Okay, and now we've got a full wall. We can take that and duplicate it. We will slide it over to this end. And we will hit Control D on both of them and hit E to rotate and change pivot to center. And do 90-degree rotation. And since it's a little short, I'll scale it out. I'll go here, scale it to 1.1, 2.5, 1.01. And there we go. And let's test it out. Let's see if our fence works just like we need. No, because our player doesn't have any collision. Okay, so we have to go to Player, Add Component, physics, rigid body. We want to use gravity. We don't want to rotate anything other than our X and Z. And I don't even know. I think that we can lock those anyways. And on our enemy, we will do the same. Okay. That is not what we want to happen, and we will prevent that with a big collider. Colliders, nice. Game object, 3D, cube. I'm going to create a very large cube on each end to keep the player from being able to go out. But I will make it invisible, so I will hit mesh render and then it'll just be the cube. But before I do that, I want to create 4 of them. Okay, all my cubes, I will turn off their lights, and now let's see if I can still leave. No, perfect. So I'm trapped. Go off the little jump, that's fun. And since we also want to have a score, I'm going to do something else, but first I want to create one more environment. Okay, so I've got a couple ramps, I've got a couple platforms that you can walk on, I've got some interesting environments here, and I will put colliders inside environment. The last 2 things to do are to give a score and a sort of downside, like if an enemy touches you, and then to add controllers, and then we are done. Cool. We will go to the enemy to get the points. So enemy controls, and similar to our bullets, we're gonna we can just copy this on collision enter, and we go to our enemy controls, hit enter, and paste in anything the bullet collides with to anything the enemy collides with. Also, the bullets, I'd like to add a detection so that if they collide with something that isn't an enemy, they will just go away. So we will hit else, Also, we want to destroy the bullet afterwards. So instead of, when we hit the enemy, instead of having our bullet keep going, we're going to say destroy the current game object, which is the bullet. And then if we destroy, or if we hit anything else, destroy that object. And before we get this working, I'm going to comment it out. And I just want to make sure we have the bullet collisions working. Bullets, add rigid body. And we'll say that they're kinematic. So over here, in the meantime, I will turn off the enemies. Perhaps for bullets, we will change them to triggers. And then we will change our bullet script to say on trigger enter. Which means we're no longer checking for collisions, but we are checking for colliders. And we will change col to trig so that we're not checking for colliders but triggers. And let's see if this works. Yes. Cool. So now if our bullet hits something else that isn't the enemy, it's just going to stop. Otherwise it goes on for a little while. Perfect. That is exactly what I wanted. On our enemy controls, we can say on collision enter if we collided with a player. Then we are going to not destroy the player, but we are going to destroy ourselves or the enemy. Destroy. But before we do that, before we destroy ourselves, we're going to want to go into Game Manager, and we want to decrease the time. So first off, I'm going to start off with more time. So five minutes is a little too short. Maybe we could do 10 minutes. And that should be enough, so we'll change that from 500 to 600, or from 300 to 600. And then we will create a public function. And update. And we will say public void Actually, we can make this private because we want to call it every now and again. So we'll say private void reduce time. And in reduce time, we will say time left minus equals 10 seconds. Okay, so every time an enemy runs into us, we have 10 seconds less to get points. Perfect. And the other thing is, to call this, we're going to make a static variable of static float that says anyone can call it, and we'll do that by going to the variables and say public static bool, and this we will call take damage or reduce time. We'll call it take damage. And on the start, we will turn that to be false because we are not taking damage. But every time it equals true, we want to call this function. So under update, we will create something that says we took damage. We'll say if take damage equals true, then we're going to call reduce time. Okay, take damage, reduce time, which reduces our time by 10, and now we must call it, which is important. We're going to need the name of the script that we're calling over in enemy. So if we collided with the player, we're going to call the main script, and we're going to say take damage equals true. Okay, and we don't want to keep reducing damage, so as soon as we've taken time off, we're going to stop taking damage, so we'll say take damage equals false. And let's see if that works. It does not work because we have not set up a tag for our player. We will go to player, untagged, and they give you a player tag. So now let's try. Yes. Okay, so they're disappearing, which means 2:20. Yep, the time's going down faster. And then I'm going to set up something for our player and for our enemies under the game manager that just makes them disappear when the game's over. Under game manager, I will call for a public game object. And this is going to be like, everything's going to be grouped into this. We'll say characters because we want to get rid of all the, we want to get rid of the enemies, we want to get rid of the player, we just want to show the empty scene. And on start, we're going to say that the characters dot set active true. So we're going to show them. Okay. And then when we lose, when there's no time left, we're going to set it to be false. So we're going to hide the characters. Okay. And then in the game, I'm going to create an empty game object and call it characters. And this will have both the player and the enemy spawn, so that when the game is over, they just disappear. And this will also get rid of our camera. So I'm going to do a little something else. I'm going to first go to our characters and turn it off. Then I'm going to create a camera and put it at this view and hit game object, align with view. And this depth is going to be, let's see, player. The depth of our regular camera is -1. I'm going to change that to 0, and I'm going to change our end game camera to -1. So that way, when our main camera is active, we're always looking at the player. But as soon as we lose, it's not going to show. It's not going to show a blank screen. It's just going to show the environment. And we still have to get rid of our clones. Okay. So that would also mean we're going to create a check for our clones so we can delete them all. There's a few ways you could do this. Maybe this isn't, this is like, we're going to look for all the clones in the game, and then we're going to take them out. So we'll say game object, find clones equals game object dot find with tag, and then we will say find clones dot destroy, or we will say destroy find the clones. And hopefully that works. Usually with when you find things by tag, you get an array. So I'm not sure if that is something I have to change. And I'm also, for testing purposes, going to change the timer to be 100. And for the main camera, I'm going to turn off the audio listener, because we're going to keep the other camera always active, and I currently don't have any 3D sounds. Cool. There are no enemies, time remaining 0. And change this to 600, and then in display text, I'm only going to display the text if time is greater than 0. Because if it's not, then I want it to say game over or match end. And then the score is the last thing before the controllers, which will be really quick. Canvas, timer. Since we're going to have a score, I'm going to put the timer in the left corner. And just realizing that our materials are still white for the environment. So I will go to Create, Materials. I'll actually call it Obstacles. And I want to make them red. Okay. We will take our timer text and we will hit Control D and drag it over to the right. And I'm going to change this to be the right side instead of the middle, so that way it always goes to the left when it gets longer instead of going off to the right. Name it score text. And now we have to create something for it in the game manager. We will have text for score, public, text, score text. And then we will have public static score because we want to be able to call it all the time. And when we start the game, we're going to want to set score. Oh, there has to be a number here. Or a variable. So we're going to set score at the start to be 0, because every time we start the game we don't want to have any points. And then every time our bullet controls hit an enemy, that is when we will add points. So we will destroy the enemy, we will add points, and we do that by saying game_manager dot score plus equals, I think we should get, for each enemy we destroy, a point. You can also do that by saying plus plus, either one works. And then here in game manager we will take our score text, which is the same thing we have here, and we'll say if time left is less than 0, we will say score text dot text equals score plus score. But if the game is over, we'll say final score. Okay, let's try it out. Whoops, have to assign it. Okay, game manager, score text, applied. And here we go, we can test it out. So currently we have no points, then we have 1 point, then we have 1 point. And you can even, I mean, you can create things like ammo, bullets, like pickups. So you would create an integer, final score 11. Okay, you would create an integer for how much ammo you have, and every time you click the mouse, it would decrease the ammo by 1. Then you could create little clones of pickups throughout the game that would increase your ammo. Or when an enemy dies, it would spawn an ammo. Those are all doable, but for the tutorial, we are just going to finish up with the controller settings. And we will do that in player movement. And we'll have a checkbox under our user interface. So game object, UI, and since we already have a canvas, we will go to toggle. And here we'll bring this up to the top. Then can we center it? Change score text to be on the right, toggle. I'm not sure if we can center it, but I'm going to line it up with the others. Okay, and I'm going to change toggle to controller toggle. Label. Have controller. And we're going to start it off with not being checked, which should just turn it off. Correct. Okay. So at the beginning, don't have a controller. Sorry about that. Okay. Then, this is important because in our player movement and other controls, we're going to set up the controllers. So player, look, and player movement. I'm going to get rid of all these ones that don't matter anymore. Okay, player, look, move, and shoot can be done with a controller pretty easily. And I will create a variable. Actually, I will create it in the master, the game manager, and it will be a static. Public static bool has controller. Okay, and then I will also create a function a public void has controller with both capitals. And then we will say has controller and so what this should actually say is equals whatever has controller isn't. So when we click the button, it should change to be whatever we had, well, whatever we don't have. So if we don't have a controller plugged in, we click the toggle, it should change us to have a controller. And we will also set it to false. Okay, so we don't have it. Then we will go to player movement, and we will create a pretty big check over everything that says if game_manager dot has controller equals false. Whoops. Okay, so this says if we don't have the game controller, and I'm going to comment that. I'm going to delete this end bracket and close it down here. Else so if we don't have the controller, it's going to end there. And if we do have a controller, so else, if we don't, and then otherwise, and I've already written the script for this before, so I will just grab that. So this is for the moving on axis. I will put this into the game and then we will grab the code from it. So move on axis, we need these variables, the horizontal and the vertical axis. I'm going to copy that, go to player movement, and up at the top I'm going to create these and I'm going to comment them. These are the axes in which you can set up controllers and different things. You can actually control the keyboard with these too, but I find I have very specific controls that I like to set up. So then I'm going to copy this, which says transform.position plus equals vector3 right times input that get axis horizontal. It's essentially saying whatever we put into the controllers, left stick and right stick, or left stick up and down, or left and right, we're going to move that way, times our speed. Okay, and we can actually, there's something that people create called dead zones, which is if your controller sticks a little bit, then you don't want to pick up that slight lag forward. You can create a dead zone that says if the input is greater than the dead zone, which is, you know, you can set it, I usually set it to 0.55, but you can set it to whatever. So right now we'll just set it to normal. We're going to go to player look and set up a similar thing to what we have up here, which is if we don't have a controller, okay, and then if we do have a controller, we're going to Unity, we want look on axis, and this one has the right stick, horizontal, so under player look, we're going to add in those variables. So we have public string, right stick, horizontal, and we actually have to create these, or we have to create these, essentially. And the same for this one, we have to create, Our horizontal and vertical are already in there, but we have to create a second horizontal 2 and vertical 2. And under update, see here's the dead zone, float dead zone. And so here we're saying that the shoot direction, it's similar to above. The target is where our stick is pointing, the direction our stick is pointing. And it keeps track of those values with horizontal and vertical, negative and positive, and then horizontal negative positive, vertical negative positive, and positive obviously being up and to the right, negative being down and to the left. We can exit out of those. And I will delete them. Okay, and shooting is the last one. So network manager, shooting. Okay. Bullet, velocity, speed, input.getAccess, right trigger. So before we do that, we have to set up the if this is true or not. Player shooting. If we do have a controller. Okay. So that's the end of the update. If we have a controller, if we don't have a controller, then we're going to go to shooting. We have the speeds. All we need is if input.get right trigger. And the time is appropriate. Then do this. Perfect. Okay. And we'll go into Unity. I'm going to delete shooting. And to make sure that we have all the project settings correct, I'm going to open up this file, and while that's opening, you go to Edit, Project Settings, Inputs. So Edit Project Setting, Inputs, then the axes. And here's where we have horizontal, vertical, fire, all those things. And what we've named them is, I've named them right trigger for fire, I believe. Okay, we've got our other Unity file opening up. And here in this one, I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings, Inputs to see what I created. So horizontal, I'm going to pull this over to my second screen, but I'm going to do it on this main one. Close vertical. Horizontal, I have as horizontal, left, right, AD, 3. This is all correct. And then x-axis, get motion from all joysticks. Cool. Then we're going to right click and duplicate to get horizontal 2. And horizontal 2 has left, right. You don't use, get rid of these. And then this one is going to be inverted, and instead of key mouse, we're going to change it to joystick axis, fourth axis, and get motion from all joysticks. If we have multiple players, then you're going to want to change which one it is. Unity supports up to 16 joysticks, but there is actually a better way to define, like if you have buttons, if you're pressing A, this isn't the best way to do it, because there is if input.get joystick controller 0 or something like that. Okay, so we have horizontal 2, awesome. We're going to go to vertical and duplicate it and change it to vertical 2. And in vertical 2, we're going to take out that control, that one, and then this is not inverted. It is a joystick axis, and it's the fifth axis. The last thing that we have is right trigger, which I will take from fire. I have a space in the text, so make sure there's a space here too. And we don't want any of this. No. This is 1,000. This is 0.001, 1,000. And we're going to change this to joystick axis. And this is going to be the third axis, joystick and scroll wheel, get motion. And now I'm going to set up the game controller to make sure that the button works. So we have controller toggle, game manager, has controller. Cool. I'm going to plug in my Xbox 360 controller. If you have a controller, it has to be a wired one. It can't be one that you put a charger wire onto. Okay, and then we'll see the message. It's joystick connected, awesome, metallic, Xbox 360. I'm going to hit play. And when I press stuff, it doesn't do anything. I'm going to switch this. And the right stick is working, but the left stick is not. The shooting is working, which is cool. The right stick is actually inverted, which isn't what I want. So I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings, Inputs, right trigger, inverted. And when I hit play, test it out, has controller, that's still inverted. I'm not sure why. I'm going to turn off enemies for a second. Characters, enemy spawns, okay. Right trigger, dead, sensitivity. Try changing that to 500, and then not snap. Okay, maybe it's in the code. Let's see. In our shooting, we have, no, in our look, vector 3 forward, times, maybe we'll try making this a minus and see if that does it. Oh, has controller. Okay, that is still not the way that I want it to be. Oh, and left trigger is actually working for right trigger. Okay. Let's see. I have in here the controller mapping. That's not what I want. This one. And in here, it has all the controllers for what they would be. Okay, left stick, left trigger, right trigger. So right trigger on Windows is 10. Let's try that. Edit, project settings, input, right trigger. We have third axis. Let's try fourth axis. Okay, let's try 10th. Cool. So it is 10th axis. Getting the right stick to work is the next thing. Okay. Vertical 2. Let's check our files. Right stick Y, right stick, so 4 and 5. Vertical 2 is 5. Horizontal 2 is 4. Maybe I'll try this one 5 and this one 4. No, still inverted. And I'll try maybe not inverting this one. Yeah, there we go. That is what we want. And now left stick is the next part. So here under horizontal, they've got horizontal, and we're going to change maybe not any of this. Let's see. Left, right, AD. Let's see. Left stick is x-axis and y-axis. Cool. X-axis, x-axis, y-axis. Okay. No. So normal still works. Let's check the code. We have game manager working, player shooting was working, player looking is working, player movement. Okay. Transform that position equals horizontal axis Is it... Are we not holding it long enough? Oh, you know what? Because... That's silly of me. Because our speed is 0. And this should be x. Our speed is 0, and we never increase it, which means we need a dead zone. Okay. And then we will say if Okay, so if we press horizontal or forward greater than the dead zone, we will increase our speed. There we go. And now this should work just like we want it to. Okay, play. Has controller. Yes. And there we go. That is, ooh, the wrong color. And we can actually move pretty fast. Because we did not set up the limit in our other code. So we have to say if speed. So this is for if we're not pressing it, it lowers our speed. If speed. And that caps it, and then we're all set. And you now have a thumbstick shooter that you can do with either a mouse and keyboard or a controller. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to include the links to all the free stuff, like Unity, which I think is the only thing that I used for this, but you can make this whole project. Took me, I think, 2 hours to do or an hour to do the first part, about an hour to do this part, and then you got a working game. And like I said, you can always add in more stuff, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was helpful. Cheers.